Welcome. My name is Ashante Horton. I'm the NCSS Conference Services and Education Manager. Tonight's presentation is the second session in a webinar series, Religious Social Studies in You. And this is the Essentials of Dialogue. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Morley so he can get the webinar started.
Thank you, Ashante, and good evening to all of you. My name is Morley Balaji, Director of Education and Curriculum Reform for the Hindu American Foundation. Again, reaffirming our welcome to all the participants. Before I hand it over to our wonderful presenter, Kristen Looney of the Tony Blair Faith Foundation's Face to Faith, I'd like to go over a couple of the 7 principles for inclusive education by Tanenbaum that'll be applicable to the essentials of dialogue. One key principle is preventing prejudice. And that's because most prejudice is caused by lack of contact and knowledge. And by creating opportunities for contact between 2 or more groups of people who hold prejudiced opinions of the other, this contact can lead to a change of opinion and can help overcome prejudice. This is something that a lot of teachers deal with in increasingly diverse classrooms. The other principle that's applicable to this evening's session by Kristen is teaching and learning about cultures and religions. Dialogue is a primary tool for learning about religions and cultural differences. And really what you see in what Face-to-Faith does is having that one-on-one dialogue, often separated by thousands of miles away, but literally in each other's classrooms. And that helps to establish safe and respectful environments for sharing about diverse belief systems and understanding similarities and differences across beliefs, tradition, and values. So Kristen brings a wealth of experience as an educator and obviously facilitator for Face-to-Faith. And so without any further delay, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Kristen Looney of Face-to-Faith.
Thank you, Morley and Ashante, for the wonderful introduction, and good evening to everyone. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you this evening and look forward to your questions as we move through the webinar together. But first, I'll go through the presentation, and certainly if you have any questions, though, I would love to be able to answer them now, or we can certainly follow up after the webinar. So tonight we continue exploring the best practice when teaching about religion in public schools. As we know, religion plays a critical role in shaping events in the United States and around the world. The US is becoming more religiously diverse, and we need to give our students the skills to understand the people who live in their own communities in our country and around the world. Now, the world has watched in horror as violent acts of religious extremists have reached a new level of barbarity. Recent events in Paris and Syria, Pakistan and Nigeria, and the continued sectarian violence in the Arab-Israeli conflict have brought intense media focus on the role of religion and beliefs that have been played up in these events. As educators, we need to be able to teach students the basics about the many religious traditions around the world, help put these current events into context, but also help students understand the complexity of these traditions and hopefully give them a glimpse into the lived experience of these traditions. So as we know, the lived experience of being a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu depends greatly on where we live in the world. Muslims living in Amman, Jordan, and in New York City will have very different lived experiences. Christians living in Salt Lake City or in Rome, Italy, will perhaps express their faith in different ways. Hindus living in San Francisco or New Delhi, India, will also experience their traditions in different ways. Now, unfortunately, what we tend to find in schools, not only in the US, but around the world, is that there is a basic lack of knowledge about the religions of the world. There is little or no opportunity to learn about the complexity of each religion. There's often no or little opportunity to learn about the lived experience from peers who have different religious beliefs, traditions, and values. And oftentimes, there's little or no opportunity to learn the skills of dialogue needed to understand the similarities and the differences of those who have different religious beliefs, traditions, and values. And unfortunately, what this can lead to, and as many of you, I'm sure, have seen, not only in your own schools and communities, but certainly around the world, is misunderstanding, stereotypes, prejudice, bullying and violence, and certainly extremism, which we've seen most recently. Now, Gordon Allport did a great deal of work, actually in the 1950s, about the nature of prejudice. And he wrote that most prejudice is caused by lack of contact and knowledge. And he believed that if you create opportunities for contact between two or more groups of people who hold prejudiced opinions of the other, the contact can generate a change of opinion and can help overcome prejudice. Now, at Face to Faith, which is a project of the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, the core of what we do and what we truly believe is that students need to be able to be given the skills of dialogue, that dialogue is a primary tool for learning about religious and cultural differences. But what is dialogue? And we get that question lots and lots from teachers around the world in the countries that we work in, because dialogue is very different from conversation. It's certainly not chit-chat. What is dialogue? Well, we believe that dialogue is an empowering process which enables students to encounter the other in a safe environment, transforming the unfamiliar into the familiar. It is profoundly reciprocal, and it is rooted in an open and mutually respectful approach. And as I go through our presentation and we begin to really explore the different skills of dialogue, hopefully you will begin to see this played out. Now, many teachers will say to us, well, we have a debate club in school, and so our students really know how to engage in debate and really know how to engage in this type of dialogue. And I think it's important to note that the debate is a very different skill than dialogue. Debate is incredibly important, and certainly we see it in, Model UN. We see it in debate clubs, and it's an incredibly important skill that our students absolutely need to have and to excel at. But debate is a very different skill from dialogue. In debate, you have a winner and a loser. You're showing your evidence. You want to support your point of view, and you really want to win the argument. Now, that's very different from dialogue, because in dialogue, you really have two winners. You're not trying to win an argument. It's more about, I'm learning from what you have to say. You're learning from what I have to say. We both learn, even if we agree to differ, even if we disagree, we're both learning from one another. So it's mutual. Now I'm going to run through the key skills of dialogue that we have found that is very important in doing this work of learning about each other's religious traditions, cultures, backgrounds. These are very important skills that we focus on in our curriculum, and we feel that can be very helpful in your classroom as you're studying these subjects. Even if you don't engage in dialogue with people around the world, they're still very important skills to develop when you're beginning to learn about different cultures, different traditions, especially different religions. So the first skill is an open attitude. When you think about your students, do your students come with an open attitude? Are they open to learning about the lives and values and beliefs of other people? Do they have a healthy level of curiosity about people that they don't know about? Are they confident in sharing about their own lives, their own values and beliefs? So would your students be able to say, I believe X. This is really important to me, and this is why. Are your students able to suspend judgments in favor of listening with open hearts and minds and ears? Are they able to listen deeply and really suspend judgment until they've really understood where the other person is coming from? Are they able to make others in a dialogue feel safe enough to also share personal thoughts and beliefs? So these are the skills these are the things that we really kind of wrap up in this key dialogue skill of an open attitude. And this is something that many students don't automatically have. Some of them do, but this is something that can really be learned and practiced. Now, the second skill is the skill of speaking. And this one just kind of makes me laugh because I remember when I first engaged my students in the face-to-face program in my classroom, I thought, my students talk all the time. They're going to be fine. No worries. They can talk. They never really are quiet. And so it'll be no problem at all. But what I didn't realize as a teacher that there are certain skills in speaking, especially engaging in dialogue. And the first is probably the most important. Are your students able to speak for themselves and not on behalf of others? One of the biggest rules in dialogue is that students always speak from an I perspective. I think, I believe, my experiences. And when we all speak from an I perspective, what happens is it's immediately apparent that there are many different perspectives in the room. And one perspective is not more important than the other perspective. If all of us are speaking from our own perspective, talking about our own experiences. Are your students able to give good descriptions and details and explanations when speaking about their community or their culture, their faith, their belief, their values? Are they able to do that? Have they had time to kind of think about it and think about how they would articulate that? And speak to someone else about these things that might be very different for someone, or someone might be hearing about for the first time. Can they speak from the heart about things that are important to them and not rely on things that are written down on paper in front of them? Are they able to refrain from using them and us language? So they think that and we think that, this. And oftentimes when we're first working with students, we'll hear students say, well, all of us at, senior high school think X, or all of us in the class believe this. And so what we need to do is help students to kind of break it down and say, well, what do you believe? What do you think? And then let's bring some other perspectives in, because we know that your classmates might have other ideas and thoughts and perspectives that they want to bring in. Are your students able to frame questions within the context of their own experiences? So are your students able to think about their experiences in the world and then ask questions of other people based on those experiences to learn about either similarities or differences in other people's experiences? So there are a lot of skills that go into this key skill of speaking. And so these are skills that your students can practice in the classroom, and the more they practice, the better they become at it. The next skill is listening. And this is a very hard skill, I think, for many of us, especially those of us who, find ourselves talking a lot, or are extroverted personalities, or are A-type personality, or are used to running things. The skill of listening is a very, very important one in dialogue. So as you think about your students, are your students able to show respectful and attentive body language when in dialogue with others? This is a really important thing. Body language is absolutely essential for our students to think about. When they're meeting people for the first time, are they looking bored? Are they looking uninterested? Are they twirling their hair? Are they braiding their neighbor's hair? I've seen it all on many video conferences that I've done, and also in the classroom when working with my own students. Are they able to be attentive and show that they're listening and they're curious and they're interested in what the person next to them is saying, or the person halfway around the world in a video conference is saying? Are your students able to ask questions that clarify? So if they've heard someone say something that they don't quite understand, do they have the courage to say, hold on a second, can you tell me more about that? Or I don't understand what you were saying. Can you help me understand that? Or are they able to challenge it maybe and say, well, gosh, that's not my experience. Let me tell you about my experience. And then I want to hear more about yours to find out why you believe what you do, or how that experience changed your life. Are your students able to focus on other students without worrying about what the teacher is thinking, or if there are any other adults in the room, or are your students worried about saying the right thing, or, trying to impress someone else in the room? Are they really focused on the person speaking and engaging with that person, or are they more worried about trying to impress someone else? So these are some of the many skills that go into this deeper set of skills of listening. And again, these are difficult and have to be practiced. But when students are able to learn these skills of listening, it's amazing what happens when they're able to really heard from their colleagues, And that takes us to the next key dialogue skill, which is around the world and in the US. And I've noticed that many students in the US have a hard time kind of, responding to what they've heard. When I've listened to the dialogue that they're engaged in, they'll often have lots of questions, and they will be thinking about lots of questions that they can bring to the discussion, but they're not necessarily responding to what the person has said. And that's an important skill. Instead of having students think about, oh gosh, what can I ask? What's the next question? Or I'm really curious about this. Having students really listen intently to the person speaking and then responding to exactly what the person has said and taking the dialogue deeper, either asking another question or bringing in their own experience, or, asking for clarification, which sometimes is important. Are your students able to ask questions that explore meaning and significance? Or are they just asking, more surface questions? Getting to the point where students are exploring meaning and significance and feel comfortable asking questions, really digging down deep to find out what are the similarities, what are the differences, why are these similarities important to us working together, or what are these differences and why are those important, and how can I learn more about them? Or how do I disagree with you? Because I don't agree with you, but how do I disagree and how do I respond saying that I don't agree, but how can I respond within a context of respect? These are all skills that are very, very important for our students to learn. And then I think the final set of skills is really reflection. Are your students really able to identify, the major influences in their life? Are they able to reflect on their own lives? What influences them? What influences their behavior, their beliefs, their thinking? Are your students able to place themselves in the local, national, and global communities and really think about who they are in terms of someone who's in a school, local school, in a local community, but then someone who lives in the country of America, and then someone who lives within a global community, and really understand what that means? Are your students able to find the differences as well as the similarities? And I think a lot of dialogue work has focused on, let's find the common ground. And I think that's really important. We need to find the common ground to be able to work together. But I think even more importantly is, let's explore the differences. And let's find out, what the differences are and why those are important. And let's learn about each other and learn about those differences and celebrate the differences and understand that they are differences, and that the purpose of learning about our cultures, our background, our faith, our beliefs is not to all kind of agree with each other. It's really to understand the differences and to respect the differences and to have a deeper understanding of how those differences are really manifested in the community. And then are students able to really reflect on their own skills of dialogue? And, are students able to say, well, gosh, I could have asked this, I could have asked that, here's a question that I didn't ask that perhaps would be helpful to ask later. And are students able to explain how their learning through dialogue may impact their behavior or their choices in the future? So if students have come to a new understanding about something, if they're understanding, Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism, and they're really understanding a lived experience, if it's changed their mind, if it's changed their perspective, then are they able to see how that change is really impacting their behavior, the words that they use, the actions that they use, and perhaps even their choices in the future? So these skills of dialogue, are incredibly important, I think, when students are learning about different religions and traditions around the world, different cultures, and also when students are meeting people who have very different world experiences, very different beliefs than themselves. These skills give students really, I think, the confidence and the competence to be able to engage with people who are very different from themselves and to really learn a great deal from one another. So I just want to show you very quickly just a quick graph about the depths of dialogue and how deep do we go. So I'm sure in many of your classes you see basic question and response, and that is the first important skill. The first level of connection is asking questions and responding. But then the next level down is the response question. So a student talks about perhaps an important festival that is, experienced in her community. And so instead of another student who is listening saying, oh, well, I have a festival that's similar to that, perhaps the student can stick a little bit more closely and ask more from the original student. Well, tell me about that. I want to know, how is it celebrated? Can you tell me about perhaps the food or the music, or is there dancing, or are there special clothes, or are there special traditions? Is there a special story that goes along with that? So really responding and digging deeper before going on to another topic. The next level is showing agreement or disagreement, and this can often be difficult, I think, for people to really disagree with one another in a respectful way. But it's important because, again, there's no way that all of your students, whether you have 20 or 40 students in your classroom, they're all going to agree on everything. And how do we get to the point where we can disagree in a very respectful way? The differences and why they're different and why those differences are significant, so we can know where the other person is coming from. And then, the deepest, we went in with one thought. Through dialogue, we're coming out the other end, and we've learned a lot, and perhaps we're rethinking, or we're breaking down a stereotype that we had, or the prejudice that we've always held is challenged, and we've begun to think about this particular topic in a whole new way, which is really what we're aiming for. Now, Face to Faith is a program where we really focus on giving students around the world. We're working in about 20 different countries around the world, and giving students these dialogue skills, working with teachers, giving them these dialogue skills. But we really want teachers and students to be able to practice these skills. and to practice them not only within the classroom, but then to practice them with their global peers. And so what we do is we set up video conferences. And so teachers may request video conferences between their classroom and classrooms around the world. And it's a free program. We're happy to set it up because what's important to us is that students are learning these skills. We also offer a secure online community where teachers can upload their students into this secure community, and students are able to engage in dialogue with other students around the world who are also on the online community. We have thousands of students on the community from countries all over the world. It's a moderated site, and so anything that has a word that we're concerned about is flagged up, and then our moderators will go back to the student and ask them to either rewrite it or we'll tell them that they can't publish it. We need to make sure it's a very safe place for all students to be. We also have a program called Team Blogging, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but that's basically a very structured blogging program with schools in different parts of the world, which has become very, very popular in the US, especially since students can blog at night from homework and it doesn't take time during the day. And then oftentimes what we see is that as students connect with each other around the world, they learn about each other's communities, about their different traditions. We also engage in a lot of dialogue around current global issues, human rights and civil rights and women's rights and peace and the environment and wealth, poverty, and charity. We have a whole series of global issues that we engage students in dialogue around. That oftentimes this dialogue then ends up, inspiring students to take action in the community. And that's what we really want them to do, is to really talk about the issues that are important to you, engage in dialogue about them, but then make, plans to really engage in the community and make some positive change in their communities, whether they're in New Delhi, whether they're in Mexico City, whether they're in, St. Louis. And that's what we're seeing around the world. And a lot of it is inspired by the dialogue that is happening in the classroom, but also the global dialogue. Now, we've made sure that each of our modules, starting with the essentials of dialogue, which we require all teachers to teach in the classroom around the world. And the curriculum is very flexible. There are many schools that have already, engaged in some of these skills and students that are very familiar with these skills. And so the teachers don't have to spend a lot of time preparing their students to engage in dialogue. We have other schools around the world that are mostly, the students are doing rote teaching and responding. And so dialogue skills are completely new. And so these teachers are spending a lot more time introducing dialogue skills to their students. But we completely rely on the professional judgment of teachers to pick and choose the lessons which make most sense to them in the classroom. And we just want to make sure that everyone has had some preparation before we have the global dialogue. It's important to us that we also map to best practices in pedagogy. So all of our modules have been mapped to Common Core State Standards, to C3 Framework for Social Studies State Standards, for the 6 Proven Practices of Civic Education, and for the Charlotte Danielson Framework for Teaching. And we have found that this is very helpful for teachers, that they're able to use the lessons and they're able to see how these are mapped directly to each of the lessons. Now, here is a picture I just wanted to show you of a setup for a video conference. As I said, we do host global video conferences. And here is a picture of one classroom, and then you can see the other classroom on the screen. To have these global video conferences, you really don't need expensive equipment at all. We have coordinators in about 10 different countries, and these are countries where there has been a lot of religious conflict. And so in Pakistan and in Egypt and in Israel and in Palestine and in India and in Indonesia and so on. And many of these schools cannot afford, expensive equipment. And so just the basics will do. So as long as you have a laptop or a computer with an inexpensive camera and external microphone, and you have internet access, that's pretty much all you need to be able to connect. And we use BlueJeans, which is a video conference platform, which has been absolutely wonderful and has really enabled us to connect the most, remote schools, especially our schools in Quetta, Pakistan in the mountains, to schools in the US, to schools on the islands in Indonesia. So it's really been remarkable that we've been able to connect students around the world using BlueJeans. I am now going to show you a video that our patron, who is Tony Blair, he set up the Tony Blair Faith Foundation after he left office as Prime Minister in the UK. And this short video shows you our program in action, and you get to hear from students about the impact of this type of program from students around the world. So I'm just going to take a quick break and show this short video to you.
So whereas in the 20th century people fought over things like communism and fascism, big political ideologies and ideas which caused world wars, all of that has gone with the passage of the 20th century, but what's replaced it in the early part of this century is a clash between cultures. Where there's ignorance, there's usually fear, and where there's fear, there can often be conflict. By contrast, where there's knowledge, there is often understanding, and where there's understanding, there can be peace. When all the worlds collide, all they know is to divide, and it's easy if they're faceless.
It's our duty as a teacher, as a parent, it's our duty to find this kind of safety environment for our children, because otherwise somebody else, they find a bad way to affect on them.
What we get from people in other cultures is from movies or news. I did not understand them well, and this face-to-face program helps me understand them.
Through face-to-face, I got a new perspective of different religions and traditions all over the world, and you really learn to respect them when you actually see them and speak to them, because it's really easy to judge people, and then you realize that everything you thought isn't really true.
I've learned how to be less judgmental. I've learned how to be understanding towards other people and towards their opinion. The video conferences taught me how to listen to others and simply dialogue.
I think the first step is sort of allowing people to engage in this initiative, and I really think it's important for people our age to get involved, so that way when we're 35 or 40 years old and we can actually go out and do things that would make a difference, we're educated enough to do so, and we can get more people involved, so that way the barriers can be torn down. People really can engage in open dialogue. Success for our foundation is getting to the point where governments recognize that a fundamental part of a young person's education for the modern world is to be educated with an open mind to those who are of a different faith or culture.
When I used to go around looking at people, they look different, they are different. But now I found out that being different is so special.
This program, it changed my way to face life. I know that there's something more than just think about ourselves.
The program changed a lot about me, about my personality, about my point of view for other people. Changes a lot of my attitude, the way I approach people from other religions, from other cultures. Now I can communicate with people without being afraid, without having these walls that I had before this program, this fear that I had inside, because the fear of difference. Because of the program, I can proudly say, bye-bye ignorance and hello world.
We need to take what is that actually wonderful and beautiful innocence that children have towards each other, and we need to educate them that this is something worth keeping, worth preserving for all of their life. Educating the next generation is the way to plant the seeds of peace.
I think what's most, moving about the video is the students talking about how the ability to meet their peers, their global peers, and engage in dialogue with them has really changed many of their views about the world and their place in the world, and has really inspired them. So in terms of the video conferencing, I know that there are a lot of video conferencing programs out there, but I think one thing that makes this program unique is that we want to make sure that it is a very safe place for students to engage in dialogue. And we realize that dialogue can sometimes be messy as students are using these new skills, and they're meeting students in different parts of the world, and they're really practicing. And so we always have a facilitator. There's a trained facilitator who helps guide the students through the dialogue. The teachers, by the time we get to the video conference, the teachers really are off on the side and really watching the students engage. And we want the students to take the initiative and really to engage with one another. And the facilitator is there to make sure that it continues to be a safe place. Now, there's always an agenda, which the facilitator and the teachers have agreed upon, and the teachers share that agenda with the students, so the students know what the issues are, what's going to be talked about it, and are prepared. So there's no surprise there. We also have technical support, which is also really wonderful. We have a team of tech specialists, and one will always join the video conference and be there to make sure that if there are any issues with a microphone or camera or with a bandwidth drop, that there's a tech person that is there supporting you and can support you through Skype, which is wonderful. So this is really incredibly helpful to have a whole team of support behind the actual video conference, because we want to make sure that this is really the students' video conference and that they have this time to engage with one another. And the video conferences are usually 1 hour. Sometimes they're an hour and a half, depending on the topics that are discussed. I want to tell you a little bit about team blogging. Here is Danish. He is our coordinator in Pakistan. One of them. We have 3 coordinators in Pakistan, and he's teaching his students here how to use the online community. And basically, team blogging is a program that we piloted last year, and it started out with just 4 schools, 2 schools in the US and 2 schools in Israel, actually. And they blogged together for 4 weeks. Well, the program was so successful that now, currently, we have about 30 teams, and each team has 4 schools. And so we have schools all over the world that are engaged in dialogue. So basically what team blogging is it's 4 weeks. We try to get 4 different locations, 4 questions. And basically, schools commit to 4 weeks. So your school would be assigned 1 week. So let's say you are school A. Your students would be responsible for blogging on question number 1. And then the students of the other 3 schools would promise to respond to those blogs. And then your students would engage in dialogue back and forth. Week 2, it would be school B. It would be their responsibility to post the initial blogs. And each student would write a blog. So you might have 15 to 20 blogs there. Then all the students from all the other schools would comment and respond to those blogs, and so on for the 4 weeks. What's amazing about this is that teachers are able to assign this for homework. The blogs are moderated. Teachers can moderate and see exactly what their students are writing. We have a moderation team that, again, will flag up anything that we're concerned about, and will work with the student and the teacher if there's something that needs to be rewritten before it's posted. And what's beautiful about it is that students have 4 weeks to engage with other students around the world using social media, but learning how to do it in a very respectful way. And we have US teachers who absolutely love this. We have a couple of schools that have been blogging, ever since the beginning of school, and they just started in September and they haven't stopped. And they've just had it as a wonderful, wonderful addition to the work that they're doing in class, as their students are learning from their peers around the world on different issues. It's probably hard to see this slide, but this is an example of a blog and then comments. So you've got the initial blog up top, and then you can see that there are 2 different comments on there. And you can see how many comments have been made, and students can go back and respond to the comments in their blog. So they're truly learning how to engage in dialogue through the written word. If you're interested in joining our program, either to use the dialogue skills, the dialogue module, which you can just simply use in your classroom, just go ahead and sign up at Face to Faith, and we will go ahead and contact you. You can just download or use any of our modules. As I said, we have basic modules on dialogue skills. Once schools have gone through the initial dialogue skills, then many schools decide that they want to look at and engage in dialogue on the other modules, which include, human rights and civil rights and women's rights and malaria and human trafficking and peace and conflict and issues of the elderly and wealth, poverty, and charity. We have a whole host of other modules, and each of those modules have about 3 to 5 lessons, depending on what they are. So you certainly, you can use any of these resources for free. And certainly if you're interested in actually then booking a video conference with a school in a different part of the world, you can certainly contact me, and I'm happy to help you set that up. We have a 4-person team in the US that helps support teachers. We have a help desk, and so you can email the help desk at any time, and we support you. We also spend a lot of time on Skype and calling teachers to support them as they're setting up for video conferences or for team blogging sessions. So you're welcome to engage in any of these, to use any of these resources. I encourage you, even if you don't do the global piece, to look at the dialogue skills and to find some way to incorporate those in your classroom. Because I truly believe that this is a really important part of discovery. As you're learning about different religions around the world, you're also learning about the lived experience. And to be able to really understand the lived experience, your students need to be able to have the skills to engage in dialogue, to really, get down into the meaning and significance and why is this important. So anyway, does anyone have any questions about the dialogue skills or about the program, about the importance of the lived experience and engaging students and finding different ways for students to learn about the lived experience of different religious traditions around the world?
I do see some questions coming in. The first question is from Aaron. I thought that all the keys to dialogue are challenging, but especially the first, open attitude. What are your suggestions for helping students to get there?
That is an excellent question. That is a really, really excellent question. I think one way is to perhaps focus on the others first, focus on the other skills. And I think as students come to realize that their perspective is not the only perspective and that there are many, many perspectives in the classroom, that they begin to open themselves up a little bit to understanding that. And as they're given an opportunity to really explore and understand it and realize that they don't have to agree. I think some students are afraid that if they hear something different, a different perspective, and that they're in a conversation that they have to agree with a person, and that's not true. There's no reason why they would have to agree. And so I think, to really teach those other skills and allow time for students to engage in those other skills. And I think students will begin to see that they're maybe their best friend or the person that they've sat next to for the last 5 or 6 years has a different perspective, and that might open them up a little bit more to hearing and seeing that that is a valid perspective. As long as they also realize that the goal is not for everyone to agree. The goal is to understand the many, many different perspectives and to learn about them and understand them. So hopefully out of teaching those other skills, some openness will come out of it. But you're right, that is a tough one. Thank you.
All right, we have a question from Jane. Is information about how to inform parents about the program being taught in the classroom available?
Oftentimes, teachers will send out information about the program and about the dialogue skills. And we certainly have a letter that teachers could use, and they could tweak a little bit to make it fit their own particular needs, just to let them know what we're engaged in. Absolutely. And I think it was interesting. I was at a teacher training in Los Angeles, and I happened to have a couple of parents there, and the parents were so excited about this opportunity. And I think many parents, and at least these parents, expressed that having an opportunity to really engage with global peers in a very safe environment was something they were excited about, because they wanted their students to be global citizens. And that, it's important in terms of being a global citizen to have these connections. But the parents were happy that it was in a safe, secure environment and a moderated environment, because they know that their students or their sons and daughters are also going into Facebook and Twitter and, Snapchat and Instagram, and those aren't as moderated, and oftentimes are not moderated at all. So yes, we do have information for parents on that. Thank you.
All right, this is just a comment from Karen. She wants to say thank you for the information. She signed up for face-to-face online already, and she wants to have a discussion with you after the fact about a program in her area.
Fantastic. I just want to say, Karen, I look forward to talking with you. And it's one of my favorite parts of this job. I was a teacher in the classroom, for many years. And I really enjoy working with teachers and helping them figure out where this will best fit. And which lessons, perhaps would be best for their particular group of students. And then it's just really exciting to see them connect with their global peers and to be able to see that happen. And then oftentimes, since I'm also a facilitator, I get to meet the students, which is wonderful too, and help facilitate some of the video conferences. So I look forward to connecting with you.
All right, and we have a question from Mary. Do you recommend having students begin to practice dialogue skills using less controversial topics, or should you just dive in?
Well, that's a really good question. I think some of the activities that we have can just be kind of, taken out of our curriculum and plunked into whatever, discussion that you might be having about current events anyway. And so you certainly could just pick those out and if you're talking about, what's happening in Syria, or you're talking about ISIS, if you're talking about, what's going on in Ukraine or what's happening in Ferguson, you could use some of the exercises that we're having or that we have, and certainly just use that for those discussions. For the initial conversations, I think it is helpful, as you want to build a safe place in your classroom, to begin with something very simple. And, I think that probably would be the best way to do it, to, really begin to build, the confidence and the trust within your own classroom, and help your students to see that, if you have 25 students in your classroom, that everyone has a voice, Everyone has a very different perspective because they all come from, different experiences. And I think that will be a wonderful way to set the stage for some more complicated, issues that you engage in dialogue on. But certainly, feel free to kind of pick and choose the different lessons that we have or the different activities we have and just use them instead of what you would normally have a discussion. And I think you'll see some real success with that as well.
All right, our next question is from Jennifer. When you set up conferences with students, do you match by age group? She works with sixth graders, which are 12-year-olds typically, and will be interested in linking with other students in a close age group.
Yes, that's a great question. Absolutely. So it's basically 12 to 14-year-olds that we will connect with each other, and then 15 plus. And so basically either middle school or high school. And it's really important that we kind of respect those different developmental ages and those groups, because the students in middle school are going to have a very different set of experiences and will ask different questions than the students in high school. So yes, I'm glad you asked that question. We are very careful about that. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions that have come in. If people have questions after the presentation, will you be available to answer them?
Absolutely.
All right. So if there are no other questions at this time, I would like to thank all of you for coming, and thank you to Kristen and Morley for helping to pull everything together. It was a really great webinar, and we look forward to you all attending the next one in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much, everyone.